Imagine venturing into the heart of the wilderness, where every rustle in the trees and every shadow could be the beginning of a life-threatening encounter. In these tales, seasoned adventurers find themselves facing off against nature's most formidable predators. From the remote forests of Siberia to the icy expanse of the Arctic, these stories reveal the terrifying moments when a routine hunt, a family camping trip, or a peaceful hike turns into a desperate fight for survival. What happens when preparation meets the unexpected? Stay with us as we uncover 6 harrowing stories where survival hangs by a thread. On August 2nd, 2024, deep within the Siberian wilderness of Russia, Ivan, a 45-year-old experienced moose hunter, embarked on what he believed would be a routine day in the wild. Ivan was renowned in his small village for his exceptional tracking abilities and deep understanding of the forest. Hunting wasn't just a pastime for him, it was a way of life, a tradition passed down through generations. The dense Siberian forests, with their towering pine trees and thick underbrush, were as familiar to Ivan as his own home. Ivan set his sights on a remote area known for its abundant wildlife. This region, far removed from civilization, was home to moose, wolves, and the more dangerous grizzly bears. These Siberian grizzlies were notorious for their size and aggression, particularly during the summer months when food was plentiful and their territories were fiercely protected. Despite the risks, Ivan felt confident, armed with a high-powered rifle, a knife, and a pack of supplies. The morning air was crisp as Ivan set out, the sky clear above the thick canopy. He had spotted fresh moose tracks near a river the previous day and was determined to follow them. The hunt demanded patience and silence, traits Ivan had mastered over years of experience. As he ventured deeper into the forest, the familiar sounds of the wilderness enveloped him. He was at peace in the solitude, his senses honed on the task at hand. Hours passed as Ivan tracked the moose through dense terrain, moving cautiously to avoid making any noise that could alert his quarry. The forest was thick, making visibility difficult, but Ivan's patience and instincts kept him on the right path. His focus on the hunt, however, blinded him to the danger lurking nearby. Unbeknownst to Ivan, he had strayed into the territory of an exceptionally aggressive grizzly bear. This massive bear, having recently made a kill, was guarding its meal with ferocity. The scent of fresh blood hung in the air, a warning Ivan, focused on tracking the moose, failed to detect. The bear, sensing an intruder, grew increasingly agitated. Grizzlies are known to attack when they feel threatened, and this bear was no exception. As Ivan followed the tracks deeper into the forest, the bear closed in silently. Ivan remained oblivious to the danger until the bear charged, covering the distance in seconds. Startled, Ivan turned just in time to see the enormous creature rushing toward him, eyes locked with deadly intent. The bear's impact was immediate and overwhelming, knocking Ivan to the ground. His rifle slipped from his grasp as the bear's powerful jaws clamped down on his shoulder. Ivan screamed in pain as the bear mauled him with brutal force. The attack was swift and merciless, leaving Ivan with little chance to defend himself. The bear's claws tore into his flesh, each strike more vicious than the last. Ivan's screams echoed through the forest, unheard by any human ears. The bear's assault continued relentlessly, dragging Ivan deeper into the forest, away from the riverbank where the attack began. The dense underbrush made it impossible for Ivan to escape, even if he had the strength to try. The bear, driven by instinct to protect its territory and food, showed no sign of stopping. As the attack wore on, Ivan's strength ebbed. The excruciating pain and the bear's sheer power overwhelmed him. His vision blurred, and his thoughts became disjointed as the reality of his situation set in. He was alone, far from help, and at the mercy of a ferocious predator. Eventually, Ivan's body went limp, his consciousness fading. The bear, sensing its prey was no longer a threat, ceased its attack. It dragged Ivan's broken body further into the thick forest where it began to feed. Back in Ivan's village, his absence was quickly noticed. Known for his punctuality, his failure to return home that evening raised immediate concern. His family and friends, aware of the wilderness's dangers, grew increasingly fearful. A search party of local hunters and villagers was organized the next morning, setting out at first light, hoping for the best, but dreading what they might find. The search party moved cautiously through the forest, following Ivan's trail. Signs of a struggle soon appeared: blood stains, torn clothing, and the unmistakable tracks of a grizzly bear. The grim realization of what had happened weighed heavily on the group, but they pressed on, determined to find their friend. After hours of searching, they discovered Ivan's remains. The scene was gruesome, a stark testament to the brutality of the attack. The bear had dragged Ivan deep into its territory, far from the initial encounter. The search party was shaken, and a heavy silence fell as they prepared to bring Ivan's body back to the village. Ivan's death sent shockwaves through the community, serving as a tragic reminder of the Siberian wilderness's dangers. His family and friends mourned his loss deeply, and the village held a solemn memorial service in his honor. The incident sparked discussions about the increasing risks of venturing into bear territory, particularly during the summer when such encounters were more likely. Ivan's story became a chilling example of nature's unpredictability, a cautionary tale about the raw, uncontrollable power of the wild. His encounter with the grizzly bear would be remembered for years, a sobering reminder of the perils that even the most skilled and experienced hunters could face in the Siberian wilderness. On June the 15th, 2024, in the heart of Alaska's Denali National Park, the Thompson family embarked on a much-anticipated summer camping trip. The family of four, John the father, Sarah the mother, and their two children, Emily, aged 10, and Jake, aged 8, had spent months planning this adventure. They were excited to explore the vast wilderness, experience the breathtaking beauty of Denali's landscapes, and bond over campfire stories under the starry skies. John Thompson, a passionate nature enthusiast, had always dreamed of sharing a true wilderness experience with his family. Having grown up camping with his father, John was well-versed in outdoor survival skills and had meticulously studied the bear safety guidelines provided by the park. Confident in his preparations, he believed they were ready for the adventure. Sarah, though slightly apprehensive about the inherent risks, trusted her husband's expertise. She looked forward to the chance to disconnect from the daily grind and spend quality time with her family. Emily and Jake, curious and full of energy, were eager to see wildlife up close and explore the trails winding through the park's dense forests and open meadows. The family arrived at their chosen campsite, a secluded spot near a clear, flowing river, in the late afternoon. It was the perfect location, offering stunning views of the surrounding mountains and plenty of space for the children to play. They quickly set up their tent, arranged their gear, and followed all the recommended precautions, including storing their food in bear-proof containers and setting up their cooking area away from their sleeping quarters. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the Thompsons gathered around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. The crackling fire and the distant calls of wildlife created a peaceful atmosphere. The children, wide-eyed with excitement, asked questions about the stars twinkling above and the animals that inhabited the park. John and Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing they were creating cherished memories. However, the tranquility of the evening would soon be shattered. Unbeknownst to the family, the enticing aroma of their campfire cooking had caught the attention of a large grizzly bear roaming the area in search of food. Driven by hunger and curiosity, the bear began to approach the campsite, its powerful sense of smell guiding it through the darkness. As the family prepared to settle down for the night, John noticed movement in the shadows beyond the firelight. Initially thinking it was a small animal, his heart sank as the figure came closer. The unmistakable silhouette of a grizzly bear emerged from the darkness, its eyes reflecting the flickering flames. John's instincts kicked in, and he quickly instructed Sarah and the children to move into the tent and stay quiet. He hoped the bear would lose interest and move on if it didn't perceive any threats. But the bear was too close now, and its curiosity had turned to something more dangerous. John knew he had to act quickly to protect his family. The bear, now only a few feet away, began to circle the campsite, its massive form casting a menacing shadow. John grabbed a pot and pan, hoping the noise would scare the bear off. He banged them together, yelling as loudly as he could. But instead of retreating, the bear's demeanor shifted from curiosity to aggression. Without warning, the grizzly charged at John with terrifying speed, its claws and jaws ready to strike. John barely had time to react as the bear lunged at him, knocking him to the ground. The rest of the family, huddled in the tent, could only watch in horror as the bear began its brutal assault. The bear's powerful claws tore into John's leg, and searing pain shot through his body as the massive animal pinned him down. The grizzly's jaws clamped onto his shoulder, shaking him with terrifying force. John struggled desperately to free himself, trying to protect his vital organs from the bear's relentless assault, but the bear's strength was overwhelming. Blood soaked the ground as the bear continued its attack, ignoring John's attempts to fight back. Inside the tent, Sarah was paralyzed with fear. She knew she had to do something to save her husband, but the sight of the bear's sheer size and power left her frozen. The children were crying, terrified by the sounds of their father's struggle and the realization that their family was in grave danger. Sarah grabbed the only thing she could find, a small camping stove, and threw it in the bear's direction, hoping to distract it, but it barely made an impact. Just as it seemed all hope was lost, the commotion attracted the attention of other campers nearby. A group of experienced outdoorsmen, familiar with the dangers of the park, rushed toward the sounds of the attack. Armed with bear spray and noise-making devices, they knew these tools could potentially save John's life. As they approached, they unleashed a powerful spray of bear deterrent into the air, aiming it directly at the grizzly. Momentarily blinded and disoriented by the spray, the bear released its grip on John and backed away, growling in confusion. Seizing the opportunity, the rescuers continued making loud noises and waved their arms to drive the bear away from the campsite. The grizzly, still disoriented, eventually retreated into the woods, leaving John lying on the ground, severely injured but alive. Sarah and the children rushed out of the tent to his side, their relief mingled with fear as they saw the extent of his injuries. Blood soaked his clothes, and deep gashes covered his arms and legs. He was barely conscious, his breathing shallow and labored. The rescuers quickly assessed John's condition, knowing that time was of the essence. They carefully lifted him onto a makeshift stretcher and began the arduous task of carrying him through the dense woods back to the main trailhead. Once there, they radioed for emergency assistance, aware that John needed immediate medical care to survive. Every minute felt like an eternity as they waited for the rescue helicopter to arrive. When the helicopter finally touched down, the medics wasted no time stabilizing John and preparing him for the flight to Fairbanks Memorial Hospital, the nearest facility equipped to handle such severe injuries. Sarah and the children watched as the helicopter lifted off, their hearts heavy with worry. The long journey to the hospital was agonizing for Sarah, who could only hope that John would make it through. At the hospital, John was rushed into surgery. The medical team worked tirelessly to treat his injuries, which included deep lacerations, broken bones, and severe blood loss. Sarah, Emily, and Jake waited anxiously in the hospital's waiting room, their minds racing with fear and uncertainty. Hours passed before the surgeon finally emerged, his expression serious but hopeful. John had survived the surgery, but his recovery would be long and painful. He would require multiple surgeries and months of rehabilitation to regain his strength. The family, though deeply shaken by the ordeal, was grateful that John was alive. The attack left them traumatized, a stark reminder of the unpredictable and dangerous nature of the wilderness they had sought to explore. The incident sparked discussions among park officials and visitors about the risks of camping in bear country, even when all safety guidelines are followed. For the Thompson family, the memories of that night in Denali would never fade, serving as a powerful reminder of the delicate balance between humans and the wild. On August 5th, 2024, a group of adventurous tourists embarked on an Arctic expedition to the remote Svalbard archipelago in Norway. The region, known for its breathtaking landscapes and elusive polar bears, was a dream destination for many wildlife enthusiasts. Among the group was Anna, a 45-year-old woman who had spent years dreaming of seeing polar bears in their natural habitat. This trip was the culmination of her lifelong passion for wildlife and conservation. The group, consisting of 12 people, each had their own unique reason for embarking on this journey. Mark, a retired schoolteacher from Canada, sought to experience the Arctic before climate change altered it forever. Sarah, a photographer from the UK, aimed to capture the stark beauty of the frozen landscape. Hans and Ingrid, a couple from Germany, were celebrating their 25th wedding anniversary. Each person shared a deep love for nature, and the anticipation of seeing polar bears in the wild filled the air with excitement. The expedition was led by two seasoned guides, Eric and Lars, both native to the region and well-versed in the dangers of the Arctic. They had extensive experience in polar bear territory and were armed with rifles and flare guns to protect the group. Despite their knowledge, there was an underlying awareness of the risks associated with traveling in such a wild and unpredictable environment. On the second night, the group settled into their campsite, surrounded by the stunning beauty of the Arctic wilderness. The midnight sun cast an eerie glow over the landscape, and the silence of the frozen world was broken only by the occasional crack of ice or distant calls of seabirds. The tourists were in awe, with Anna particularly overwhelmed by the sense of being so close to the creatures she had admired from afar. After a long day of exploring and photographing the area, the group retired to their tents, tired but exhilarated. Anna, still brimming with excitement, lay in her tent thinking about the polar bears they might see in the coming days. The thought of encountering one of these powerful creatures up close thrilled and terrified her. In the early hours of the morning, the calm of the Arctic night was shattered. A large polar bear, driven by hunger and the diminishing availability of food, had managed to breach the camp's perimeter. The bear, drawn by the scent of the group's supplies, began to investigate the campsite. Despite the electric fence and other precautions, the bear's sheer size and determination allowed it to push through the barriers. The bear targeted Anna's tent. The sound of its approach was drowned out by the wind and the soft crunch of snow, giving Anna no time to react. The bear tore through the tent's fabric with its powerful claws and dragged Anna out into the cold night. The suddenness of the attack left her defenseless, and before the rest of the group could understand what was happening, the bear had already inflicted fatal injuries. The rest of the group awoke to the horrifying sounds of the attack. The guides immediately sprang into action, grabbing their rifles and rushing toward the source of the commotion, but it was too late. Despite their best efforts, the bear was only stopped when it was shot and killed. The camp, once filled with the anticipation of adventure, was now plunged into a state of shock and grief. The once vibrant landscape now felt cold and unforgiving, a stark reminder of the dangers of venturing into such a wild environment. Eric and Lars, though maintaining a composed exterior, were visibly shaken. They had encountered polar bears before, but never had they faced such an aggressive and tragic outcome. The decision was made to evacuate the group immediately, as the risk of another bear encounter was too great. The guides used their satellite phone to contact the ship, and arrangements were made for an emergency evacuation. The process of moving the group back to the ship was tense and somber, each step taking them further from the scene of the attack. Once aboard the ship, the mood was heavy with grief. The remaining tourists were offered counseling and support, but the emotional scars ran deep. Anna's tragic death underscored the risks that come with exploring the world's wild places, leading to calls for stricter safety measures and greater awareness of the dangers posed by wildlife in the Arctic. The incident served as a grim reminder of the delicate balance between humans and nature, particularly in such a remote and unforgiving environment. The memory of that fateful morning would remain with those who were there, a reminder of the power and unpredictability of the natural world. 29-year-old Sarah set out on what she anticipated would be a peaceful hike through the vast expanse of Ontario's Algonquin Provincial Park. The park, renowned for its breathtaking landscapes and rich array of wildlife, had long been a sanctuary where Sarah could escape the busyness of city life. As an avid hiker and nature enthusiast, Sarah had spent years traversing trails across Canada, but Algonquin held a unique place in her heart. The towering trees, serene lakes, and profound sense of solitude offered by the park made it her favorite retreat. Sarah was no stranger to the potential dangers that accompanied hikes in bear country. Her backpack was meticulously stocked with essential supplies, a first aid kit, a detailed map of the area, and, most importantly, bear spray. She understood the importance of making noise to alert wildlife to her presence, always adhering to the safety guidelines provided by park authorities. However, on this particular hike, the allure of the untamed wilderness led her to venture onto a more remote trail, one less frequented by other hikers. The trail wound through dense forests, where the canopy above filtered the sunlight into soft patches that dappled the forest floor. As Sarah ventured deeper into the woods, she was captivated by the vibrant hues of autumn leaves and the crisp, cool air that filled her lungs. The peace and tranquility of the surroundings allowed her to let her guard down, and she relished the solitude she had come to find. Unbeknownst to Sarah, a large black bear had caught her scent earlier that morning. The bear, driven by the need to find sustenance before the onset of winter, had been silently following her, drawn by the unfamiliar scent of a human presence. The thick underbrush and fallen leaves masked the sound of the bear's movements, allowing it to close the distance between them without Sarah noticing. The bear, driven by its instincts, was determined to investigate the source of the scent. As Sarah continued her hike, she reached a particularly secluded area of the forest, where the trail narrowed and the trees grew closer together. It was here, in the heart of the wilderness, that the bear made its move. Without warning, the bear charged at Sarah from behind, knocking her to the ground with its powerful body. The suddenness of the attack left her disoriented and terrified. She struggled to get up, but the bear was relentless, its claws and teeth tearing into her flesh. In a desperate attempt to defend herself, Sarah's instincts kicked in. She reached for her bear spray with trembling hands and managed to pull it from her backpack, spraying it directly at the bear's face. The bear momentarily recoiled, but the spray was not enough to deter the animal completely. Agitated and even more aggressive, the bear continued its assault, overpowering Sarah's attempts to protect herself. The pain from the bear's claws and teeth was excruciating, and Sarah screamed for help, her voice echoing through the forest. The forest, which had once felt so peaceful, now seemed like a prison as the bear's growls filled the air. Sarah's vision blurred as she struggled to stay conscious, her body weakening from the loss of blood. Just when it seemed that all hope was lost, the sound of voices and footsteps came from the distance. A group of nearby campers had heard Sarah's screams and rushed to her aid, armed with their own bear spray and making as much noise as possible. As the campers approached, the bear finally retreated, growling in frustration as it disappeared into the dense forest. The campers, shaken but determined, quickly attended to Sarah, applying pressure to her wounds and doing their best to keep her conscious. They knew that time was of the essence, and they wasted no time in contacting emergency services for help. Sarah's once peaceful hike had turned into a nightmare, but thanks to the quick actions of the campers, she had a chance to survive. The attack on Sarah was a stark reminder of the unpredictable dangers that lurk in the wilderness, even for the most experienced hikers. The importance of being prepared, vigilant, and never underestimating the risks of bear country was underscored by her harrowing experience. As the campers waited for the rescue team to arrive, they kept a close watch on the surrounding forest, aware that the bear might return. Sarah's life now hung in the balance, and the next few hours would determine her fate. The forest around Sarah was filled with tension as the campers worked to stabilize her while waiting for the rescue team to arrive. Her wounds were severe, with deep gashes on her arms, legs, and torso where the bear had mauled her. The pain was overwhelming, but Sarah fought to stay conscious, her body trembling from shock and blood loss. The campers did their best to keep her awake, applying makeshift bandages from their own supplies and talking to her in soothing tones, though every minute felt like an eternity. The remote location made the rescue operation challenging. The group had to carefully move Sarah to a more accessible area without aggravating her injuries. The forest seemed to close in around them as they carried her on a makeshift stretcher, their eyes scanning the surroundings, wary of the bear returning. The once tranquil wilderness now felt threatening, every rustle in the bushes sending waves of anxiety through the group. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the rescue helicopter's distant thrum broke through the oppressive silence. Relief washed over the group as they saw the chopper descending through a break in the trees. The paramedics wasted no time, quickly loading Sarah into the helicopter and administering first aid to stabilize her condition. The campers, exhausted and shaken, watched as the helicopter lifted off, carrying Sarah away from the scene of the attack. The flight to the nearest hospital in Ottawa was a race against time. The paramedics worked tirelessly to keep Sarah stable, monitoring her vital signs and administering pain relief and fluids. The damage inflicted by the bear was extensive, with several wounds requiring immediate surgical intervention. At the hospital, a team of doctors and nurses was already prepared for Sarah's arrival. She was rushed into surgery, where the medical staff worked to repair the damage caused by the bear's claws and teeth. The severity of her injuries required hours of meticulous surgery to stop the bleeding, close the wounds, and ensure there were no life-threatening complications. Despite the extensive injuries, the doctors were determined to save her life. Meanwhile, the news of the attack spread quickly, shocking the local community and beyond. The attack in Algonquin Provincial Park became a sobering reminder of the dangers that still exist in the wilderness, even in areas popular with tourists and hikers. It sparked discussions about the safety of solo hiking in bear country, leading to renewed calls for stricter safety guidelines and better awareness programs for visitors to the park. The aftermath of the attack left a lasting impression on everyone involved. The hikers who had come to Sarah's aid were hailed as heroes, their quick thinking and courage credited with saving her life. The park authorities reviewed their safety protocols, implementing stricter guidelines for visitors and increasing patrols in areas known for bear activity. The incident became a cautionary tale for those venturing into the wilderness, reminding everyone that nature, while beautiful, is also wild and unpredictable, demanding respect and vigilance from those who enter its domain. On July 14, 2024, in Wyoming's Yellowstone National Park, 35-year-old Mike Wilson, an experienced fisherman, set out for what he hoped would be a peaceful day of fishing along the banks of a secluded river. Yellowstone, known for its stunning geysers and abundant wildlife, had always been a favorite spot for Mike. He was drawn to the park's rugged beauty and the challenge of fishing in its wild waters. Mike had been visiting Yellowstone for years, always respecting the natural surroundings and the creatures that called the park home. Mike lived in a small town near the park and had grown up with a deep love for the outdoors. Fishing was more than just a hobby for him. It was a way of life. He spent countless hours by the rivers, perfecting his technique and enjoying the solitude that came with it. Yellowstone, with its pristine rivers and abundant fish, was his preferred destination. He often fished alone, finding peace in the quiet moments by the water. On this particular summer day, Mike chose a spot along a remote riverbank, far from the usual tourist areas. The sun was shining, and the sound of the flowing water created a serene atmosphere. Mike cast his line into the river, focusing on the gentle pull of the current and the possibility of a big catch. He was unaware that he was not alone in his pursuit of fish. The dense forest surrounding the river hid a large grizzly bear, also drawn to the area by the promise of a meal. As Mike concentrated on his fishing, the grizzly bear moved silently through the trees, its powerful senses honing in on the scent of fish. Grizzlies, though often shy around humans, are fiercely protective of their food sources, especially during the summer months when they are building up fat reserves for winter. The bear, likely hungry and sensing an easy opportunity, approached the riverbank where Mike was standing. Mike, absorbed in his activity, didn't notice the bear until it was too late. The sudden sound of snapping branches made him turn, and his heart raced as he saw the massive grizzly just a few yards away. The bear, seeing Mike as a potential threat to its meal, charged with astonishing speed and ferocity. In a split second, Mike's peaceful fishing trip turned into a fight for survival. The bear's charge was relentless. It knocked Mike off his feet and into the cold, rushing river. The impact of the fall left him disoriented, and before he could regain his footing, the bear was upon him, its powerful jaws and claws inflicting deep, savage wounds. Mike tried to defend himself with his fishing rod, but the bear's sheer strength and size made his efforts futile. The water around him turned red as the bear continued its attack, each moment bringing Mike closer to the brink of unconsciousness. Other fishermen in the area, hearing the terrifying sounds of the attack, rushed toward the riverbank. They arrived at a scene of chaos, with Mike struggling to fend off the grizzly's vicious assault. Without hesitation, the fishermen grabbed bear spray and rocks, hurling them at the bear in a desperate attempt to save Mike. The bear, finally deterred by the combined efforts, retreated into the forest, leaving Mike gravely injured and barely conscious in the water. The other fishermen, realizing the severity of Mike's injuries, acted quickly. They pulled him from the river, careful to avoid causing further harm to his already battered body. Mike's clothes were torn and blood-soaked, and he was barely conscious, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The scene was chaotic, as the fishermen worked together to stabilize him, using their shirts and whatever materials they had on hand to try and stop the bleeding. The nearest help was miles away, and they knew the time was critical if they were to save his life. One of the fishermen ran to his truck parked at a nearby trailhead to call for help, while the others stayed with Mike, doing their best to keep him awake and alert. The remote location meant that emergency services would take time to arrive, and the fishermen were painfully aware that every minute counted. They carried Mike to the trailhead, their own hands shaking with fear and adrenaline as they struggled to move quickly but gently. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the sound of a helicopter broke through the tension. A rescue team had been dispatched, and within minutes they arrived on the scene. The medics quickly assessed Mike's condition and prepared him for transport. His injuries were severe. The grizzly's powerful jaws had left deep puncture wounds in his torso, and his arms and legs were lacerated by the bear's claws. Mike was slipping in and out of consciousness, his body weakened by blood loss and shock. The medics carefully lifted him into the helicopter, securing him for the flight to the nearest hospital, located in Cody, Wyoming. The flight was tense, with the medics working to keep Mike stable as they sped towards the hospital. Upon arrival, a team of doctors and nurses was ready, having been briefed on the situation. They rushed Mike into surgery, knowing that they had no time to lose. The surgical team worked for hours, repairing the extensive damage caused by the bear's attack. Mike's condition was critical, and the doctors knew that it would take a miracle for him to pull through. They fought to stop the internal bleeding, repair the damage to his organs, and stabilize his broken bones. The atmosphere in the operating room was one of intense concentration. Each team member focused on their task, aware that Mike's life hung in the balance. Meanwhile, the fishermen who had saved Mike's life waited anxiously in the hospital lobby, their faces etched with worry. They replayed the attack in their minds, the image of the grizzly bear and the horrifying moments of the struggle seared into their memories. They were shaken but hopeful that their quick actions had been enough to save their friend. Hours later, the surgeon emerged from the operating room, informing them that Mike was alive but still in critical condition. He had survived the surgery, but his recovery would be long and difficult. The attack had left him with deep physical and emotional scars, a reminder of the dangers that lurk in the wilderness. As Mike lay in the hospital bed, his body covered in bandages and tubes, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. The once strong and confident fisherman was now a survivor, forever changed by his encounter with one of nature's most powerful predators. The incident was a stark reminder to the community about the risks of venturing into bear country, and it prompted renewed discussions about safety measures and awareness in the wilderness. In the frigid expanse of the Arctic, a dedicated team of scientists was deep into their climate research on a remote ice floe. The team, comprised of experts from various fields, had traveled from different parts of the world, united by a common goal: to study the rapidly changing environment in one of the most hostile places on Earth. The lead researcher, 40-year-old Dr. Erickson, was a seasoned scientist with years of experience in polar research. He had spent much of his career studying the effects of climate change in the Arctic, making him acutely aware of both the environmental challenges and the dangers posed by the region's wildlife, particularly polar bears. The team had set up their camp on a large ice floe far from any human settlement. Their camp was equipped with state-of-the-art technology designed to withstand the Arctic's harsh conditions, including barriers and alarms specifically intended to deter polar bears. The team knew that polar bears, driven by hunger and shrinking sea ice, were becoming increasingly bold in their search for food. Despite their precautions, the scientists remained constantly vigilant, knowing that a polar bear encounter could be deadly. The research was going well. The team had gathered valuable data that could provide crucial insights into the effects of climate change on the Arctic ecosystem. The days were long and demanding, but the scientists were driven by their passion for discovery. Dr. Erickson, in particular, was deeply committed to the mission. He believed that their findings could help shape global policies aimed at protecting the fragile Arctic environment. Each evening, after a long day of data collection, the team would gather in the main tent to analyze their findings and plan the next day's work. As the evening of March 18th wore on, the team settled into their routine of data analysis. The temperature outside the tent was well below freezing, and the Arctic wind howled across the ice floe. The isolation of their location was palpable, but the team found comfort in the knowledge that they were well prepared for any potential threats. However, unknown to them, a large polar bear had been tracking their scent, drawn by the promise of food. Polar bears are formidable predators, capable of traveling great distances across the ice in search of prey. This bear, likely driven by hunger and the scarcity of food, had ventured closer to the scientists' camp than any of them had anticipated. The alarms set up around the perimeter of the camp were supposed to provide early warning of any approaching danger, but on this night, they failed to detect the bear's silent approach. As the scientists continued their work inside the tent, the bear breached the camp's defenses. It moved swiftly and silently, closing the distance between itself and the unsuspecting team. By the time the bear reached the main tent, there was little time for the scientists to react. The bear's massive form cast a shadow over the tent as it tore through the fabric, intent on finding the source of the scent that had drawn it there. Dr. Erickson, who had been focused on analyzing data, was the first to be attacked. The bear's powerful jaws and claws inflicted fatal injuries before the other team members could fully comprehend what was happening. The tent erupted in chaos as the scientists scrambled to protect themselves and drive the bear away. The polar bear's sudden attack threw the entire camp into disarray. The other scientists, startled by the bear's unexpected breach, scrambled to respond. In the dim light of the Arctic night, they grabbed the flares and rifles that had been kept nearby for such an emergency. However, the bear's sheer size and ferocity made it difficult for the team to coordinate their defense. The bear, driven by hunger and instinct, continued its relentless assault on Dr. Erickson, leaving the other scientists with little time to react effectively. The team managed to ignite a flare, the bright light and hissing sound momentarily disorienting the bear. But the distraction was brief. The bear, undeterred by the flashing light, remained focused on its target. The scientists fired their rifles into the air, hoping to scare the bear away, but the initial shots did little to stop the attack. The bear's powerful jaws and claws inflicted severe damage on Dr. Erickson, who was unable to defend himself against the onslaught. As the bear continued to maul Dr. Erickson, the scientists finally managed to get a clear shot. One of the team members, a trained marksman, aimed carefully and fired, striking the bear. The shot caused the bear to release Dr. Erickson, but it took several more rounds before the bear finally retreated. The bear, wounded but still dangerous, backed away from the camp, disappearing into the icy darkness of the Arctic night. With the immediate threat gone, the team rushed to Dr. Erickson's side. The scene was grim. Dr. Erickson had suffered catastrophic injuries, and it was clear to the team that his condition was critical. They administered first aid as best as they could, trying to stabilize him while preparing for an emergency evacuation. The remote location of the camp made rescue efforts difficult, and the team knew that time was not on their side. The team sent out a distress signal, and within hours a rescue helicopter was dispatched to their location. The harsh Arctic conditions made the evacuation challenging, but the team worked tirelessly to keep Dr. Erickson alive until help arrived. When the helicopter finally landed on the ice floe, Dr. Erickson was airlifted to the nearest hospital in Tromsø, Norway. Despite the team's best efforts, the severity of his injuries proved too much, and Dr. Erickson succumbed to his wounds shortly after arriving at the hospital. The aftermath of the attack left the remaining team members in a state of shock and grief. The loss of Dr. Erickson was a devastating blow, not only to the team but also to the broader scientific community. The incident raised serious concerns about the growing dangers faced by researchers in polar regions, where climate change is increasingly driving wildlife into closer contact with humans. The team was forced to abandon their research, leaving behind much of their equipment as they evacuated the area. The tragedy sparked a renewed focus on the safety protocols for polar expeditions. In the months following the attack, there were calls for stricter measures to protect scientists working in remote and dangerous environments. Dr. Erickson's death served as a stark reminder of the ever-present risks in the Arctic and the importance of vigilance, even for the most experienced and well-prepared researchers. The incident underscored the reality that in the unforgiving environment of the Arctic, even the best-laid plans can be quickly undone by the unpredictable power of nature.